Hermes had more jobs than any other god on Mount Olympus, and at first glance, none of them seemed glamorous. He was the divine messenger, delivering orders, threats, and occasionally apologies between gods who couldn't be bothered to talk face to face. He was the god of travelers, merchants, and thieves, which meant he was simultaneously patron of legitimate commerce and highway robbery. He guided souls to the underworld and refereed athletic competitions. That last one deserves a pause. The god of merchants and thieves was also somehow in charge of local wrestling matches. When the senior gods couldn't be bothered, Hermes got the ticket. While the other Olympians had prestigious domains, Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the seas, Athena governed wisdom. Hermes just had a resume, a very long resume, the kind that makes HR wonder if you've ever held the same job for more than 6 months. He was never going to run Olympus, but he was going to do everything else. In the executive suite of gods, Zeus was the boss, Hera the chair of the board, Poseidon and Athena and the others, they fought over who ran operations. But what happens when the system breaks? When a problem arises that can't be solved with a thunderbolt or a trident? When you need a message delivered yesterday, a monster dealt with quietly, or a soul escorted safely to the great beyond? You don't file a ticket with Zeus and wait. You call the freelancer, the one running deliveries and side hustles. This is the story of Hermes, the original gig worker, the god who never had a single stable job because he did all of them, and his career began on the day he was born. Hermes wasn't born in the gleaming halls of Olympus. His father was Zeus, yes, but his mother was the reclusive nymph Maia. He was born in a remote cave, an outsider from his first breath. So, why the cave? If your father is the CEO of the cosmos, why aren't you born in the divine equivalent of the corner office with a silver spoon? The answer lies in a classic corporate governance problem. The CEO, Zeus, was having an affair, and the chairman of the board, his wife Hera, had a famously brutal policy regarding unsanctioned passion projects. Hera's department of spousal oversight was legendary. Her audits were swift, merciless, and usually ended with Zeus's lovers being transformed into a farm animal or a decorative shrub. So Zeus's affair with the nymph Maia was a deeply clandestine operation. The cave wasn't a humble birthplace. It was a strategic off-site incubator, a skunkworks project hidden far from the prying eyes of headquarters. It was the only way to ensure the new startup, Hermes, could make it past the prototype stage without being viciously shut down by Hera. And this brings us to Maia herself, Hermes' quiet mother, who represents a masterclass in surviving Olympian politics. In the saga of Zeus's infidelities, Maia is the rare case who appears to have completely escaped Hera's retribution. So, how did she pull it off? First, operational security. The Homeric hymn tells us Zeus visited her in her mountain cave with extreme secrecy, while Hera was fast asleep. Second, Maia was the divine equivalent of going off the grid. She was a shy, reclusive goddess who actively avoided the Olympian headquarters and its toxic water cooler gossip. Her isolation was her security. Hera couldn't persecute someone she didn't even know existed. And here's the most brilliant, ironic twist. Maia's cave, the secret R&D lab, became the go-to safe house for Zeus's other unsanctioned projects. When Hera turned the nymph Callisto into a bear, it was Maia who raised their son Arcus in secret. The one woman who successfully avoided Hera's wrath became the unofficial witness protection program for Zeus's other secret offspring. So Hermes didn't have a birthright to a throne. He had to hustle his way into the family business. And that hustle started immediately. The Homeric hymn in his name tells us that on the very morning he was born, he was already bored with his entry-level position as an infant. It's hard to be taken seriously when your meetings are scheduled between nap time and feeding. So while his mother slept, Hermes slipped out of the cave, already plotting. Most founders start in a garage. Hermes started while still in a crib, and his first venture was industrial-scale asset acquisition. His target? The prized immortal cattle of his older establishment brother Apollo. At Hermes' age, most kids are learning colors. Hermes was learning cattle futures. He stole 50 of them, But this wasn't mere theft. It was a masterclass in subterfuge. He wrapped their hooves and wove special sandals for himself to obscure tracks, even making the herd walk backward to confuse any pursuer. It was the original forensic countermeasure, executed by a newborn with a genius for disruption. Silicon Valley likes to talk about move fast and break things. Hermes moved fast and stole things. On his way back to the cave with the cattle, he found a tortoise. Where others saw a slow-moving reptile, Hermes saw opportunity. He invented the world's first lyre from its shell, widely considered history's first stringed instrument. But he wasn't done. He needed fire. Not stolen fire, his own. He invented friction fire on the spot, using dry twigs and determination. Prometheus, his ancestor, had stolen fire from the gods. Hermes reinvented it independently. Then he took 2 of Apollo's stolen cattle and did something audacious. He sacrificed them to the gods, including Apollo himself. If Prometheus had established the basic framework for sacrifice, gods get fat and bones, Hermes was releasing the premium version. He cooked the meat over his new flames. The aroma rose, savory and divine. He couldn't eat it. As a god, mortal food was forbidden. He could only breathe in its scent. That restraint proved his divine nature. He was sacrificing stolen goods to their owner as a job application, proving his divinity on the threshold of Olympus while simultaneously applying to join. He prepared 12 equal portions. There were only 11 Olympians. Hermes had already set his own place. Why wait for a promotion when you can create the position yourself? Naturally, Apollo, the god of truth and order, noticed his divine cows were missing. And while divine math is more about all of this is mine and you get a couple of scraps, his computational skills were sufficient to indicate that he had been robbed. As the god of prophecy, he tracked the trail to Maya's cave, where he found a suspiciously innocent-looking baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, holding a musical instrument no one had ever seen before. The confrontation was a clash of archetypes. Apollo, the golden boy, the embodiment of the establishment, versus Hermes, the cunning, disruptive upstart. The case went to the ultimate CEO, Zeus. And we can imagine Hera, the ever-watchful chairman of the board, observing these proceedings. Her usual policy for situations where she had to endure the presence of Zeus's illicit offspring involved thunderous rage and creative curses. But here the situation was complex. The victim of the crime was none other than Apollo, another high-profile, illegitimate son she was forced to endure daily. He was a constant gleaming reminder of Zeus's infidelity. So which illegitimate child bears her hatred more, the golden boy Apollo, who represents a permanent rival power base, or the charming criminal toddler who is currently making that golden boy look like an absolute fool? For Hera, this wasn't just another disciplinary hearing, it was a moment of quiet, satisfying drama. Her disdain for the newborn was present, of course, but it was tempered by the rare and exquisite pleasure of watching Apollo's exasperation. Perched on the conference table at Olympus and facing divine cross-examination by Zeus, Hermes did not confess. He employed a strategy of charming blame deflection. He lied with the unshakable confidence of a professional con artist, claiming to be just a helpless baby who didn't even know what a cow was. Which, to be fair, is a solid alibi when you're still in diapers. The Homeric hymn says, "But Zeus laughed out loud to see his evil plotting child well and cunningly denying guilt about the cattle." Zeus was delighted by Hermes' audacity. And then Hermes brought out his prototype. He played the lyre. The music was so enchanting, so utterly new, it captivated the entire court. In that moment, Zeus didn't see a criminal. He saw talent. Hermes' real superpower wasn't speed, it was excuses. Zeus saw a mind that could bypass any obstacle, talk his way out of any corner, and create beauty from chaos. He saw the value of what the Greeks call metis, cunning intelligence. He realized it was far better to have this force working for his system than against it. Hermes didn't just get pardoned, he got a promotion. He traded the lyre to Apollo to settle the score and walked away from his own criminal hearing with a suite of official titles. Olympus's newest divinity, chief messenger, divine ambassador and conductor of business for Olympus. And so began what must be the longest shift in history. Hermes became the ultimate contractor, the god you called when the problem was too delicate, too dangerous, or too morally complicated for anyone else. His resume tells the story. Let's start with one of his more delicate assignments. The task came from Zeus himself. Zeus's lover, Io, was one of Hera's priestesses, and she had been transformed into a cow as a sort of witness protection program. Hera's jealousy was legend, and she quickly saw through this ruse. She put the cow under the watch of an armed guard so that she could torment it at her leisure. Not just any guard, but Argus Panoptes, the all-seeing. Argus had 100 eyes, and though he rested them in shifts, some were always open. He was vigilance incarnate, the kind of watchman who made locks, gates, and chains feel redundant. Zeus needed a jailbreak, someone who could free Io from Hera and her 100-eyed guard. He didn't need to go to Fiverr or TaskRabbit. He texted Hermes with the deets. Hermes didn't storm the pen or fight his way through. Instead, he arrived in disguise as a simple shepherd and began the long, patient work of dismantling Argus's attention. He told story after story, each more meandering than the last, punctuated by the sound of his reed pipes. It wasn't a single lullaby, but an entire campaign of boredom, a slow, rhythmic hypnosis that slipped past the watchman's defenses. One by one, Argus's 100 eyes closed. At last, when the final eyelid fell, Hermes drew a blade of unbreakable adamantine and struck, killing the guardian in a single stroke. The mission was complete. Io was free. Hera was not one to let even death erase her favorite servant. She gathered Argus's 100 eyes and set them into the feathers of her peacock, which even today spreads its tail in a shimmering display of vigilance. Hermes didn't break the system. He lulled it to sleep and walked away. That was surveillance defeated through patience. But not every assignment called for subtlety, and not every gig carried glory. Sometimes Hermes was sent to enforce a contract. Other times he was handed a role in a much bigger con, one designed by Zeus himself. After Prometheus stole fire for humanity, Zeus didn't just punish the Titan. He had a longer game in mind. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about balance. Fire had tilted the scales towards humanity. So Zeus ordered the gods to create something irresistible to tip them back. If men had gained a gift, he would answer with a curse, one wrapped in beauty. Zeus ordered the gods to create a woman who would be both irresistible and ruinous. Pandora, her name literally means all gifted. Each god contributed: beauty from Aphrodite, skill from Athena, music from Apollo. Hermes got the assignment nobody talks about at Olympian parties. He gave her, quote, a shameless mind and deceitful nature, unquote. Zeus hit humanity with a gift that looked great on the outside, but ruins your operating system the moment you install it. You see, it wasn't the beauty or the skills the other gods gifted that doomed humanity. It was the hidden code Hermes embedded in Pandora, the subtle urge to open what should stay closed, to pursue what should be left open. When Pandora opened the jar, releasing sickness and suffering into the world, she was just executing her programming. Hermes, in this instance, was used as a tool, an instrument. He executed the order efficiently, showing his neutrality. He was messenger, trickster, servant of the brief, even when the job itself was poison. Hermes didn't design this trap, he just made sure it would spring. Sometimes the contract wasn't heroic, sometimes it was darker, but Hermes took the gigs that were offered. The dark contracts paid well, but his reputation was built on something else entirely: the ability to negotiate the impossible. When Hades abducted Persephone into the underworld, the world began to die. Persephone's mother, Demeter, wandered the earth in grief, withholding her gift of fertility for the land. Fields lay barren, harvests failed, and famine spread across the world. Humanity faced extinction, and the gods, deprived of sacrifice, faced a crisis of their own. Zeus needed resolution, but he also needed a negotiator who could cross boundaries no one else dared. He sent Hermes. Hermes descended into Hades' domain, the rare being able to pass freely between light and darkness. In that silent kingdom, he stood before Hades and forged the compromise that would become cosmic law. But there was a catch. Persephone had eaten pomegranate seeds from the underworld. The number varied by telling, 3, 6, 7, but the act itself was binding. To taste the food of Hades' realm was to belong to Hades. The seeds were the fine print that guaranteed she could never fully leave the underworld. The myth explained the rhythm of the seasons. Hermes' negotiation didn't just save humanity from starvation, it spelled out the cycles of life and death. And so the deal was struck. Persephone would spend the months of growth and green above the earth with her mother, bringing spring and summer to the fields. But for every seed she had eaten, she was bound to spend that many months with Hades in the underworld, leaving Demeter grieving and the earth barren through autumn and winter. The rhythm of planting and harvest, of life and decline, was explained not as a chance of weather, but as a consequence of a compromise, a divine custody agreement written into the turning of the year. Hermes, in this case, didn't just deliver the message. He was the negotiator. He wrote the terms of service for the seasons. The diplomatic work built his reputation, 5-star reviews, but his street-level operations defined his character. It's no accident that Hermes was patron of both merchants and thieves. Every transaction, legal or not, runs on trust, and Hermes enforced that code. Consider Battus, an old shepherd who witnessed infant Hermes driving Apollo's stolen cattle past his field. Hermes offered him a cow for his silence, a simple transaction. Battus agreed. But Hermes, ever cautious, tested this deal. He disguised himself, returned, and offered Battus a better deal, a bull and a cloak, to reveal where the cattle had been taken. Battus pointed the way without hesitation. The deal was broken. Betrayal. Hermes revealed himself and turned the old man to stone, a non-disclosure agreement with teeth, a permanent reminder the penalty for breaking a deal is absolute. Hermes' patronage didn't just punish snitches, it also empowered hustlers who played the game well. His son Autolycus became the greatest thief in Greece, blessed with a gift from his father, the ability to make stolen goods invisible or change their appearance. Autolycus could rustle an entire herd and with a touch change their hides from black to white or their horns from full to none. He was the original money launderer and asset shifter, a walking shell corporation. These interactions with mortals weren't epic gigs for the gods. This was Hermes at street level, governing the fine print of mortal hustles. One story serves as a permanent warning against snitches, the other as a masterclass in the art of the steal. He wasn't just the god of the deal, he was the god of the fine print, and the penalty for breaking it was non-negotiable. But for all the schemes, the hustles, and the morally gray contracts, there was one role Hermes never treated lightly, one job he performed with a dignity that stood in contrast to the rest of his resume. He was the psychopomp, the guide of souls to Hades. In Greek thought, death itself was Thanatos, a grim impersonal force that severed the soul from the body. But after that cold separation, a guide was needed, and that guide was Hermes. When a life ended, he would arrive, not as a trickster or a thief, but as a calm presence. Why him? Why the god of contracts and chaos for the most solemn of duties? Because this wasn't a job for a warrior or a king. It was a specialist's contract, requiring the entire suite of Hermes' skills. Perhaps because the journey from life to death is the ultimate boundary crossing. It is a frightening, unknown path. It requires a guide who is comfortable in these in-between spaces, one who knows all the roads, seen and unseen. It was the rare assignment where charm and trickery had no use. Hermes' usual smirk was gone. His job was to offer a steady hand, to lead the newly dead through the darkness, and ensure they arrived in the underworld. He wasn't the terror of death. He was the rideshare service for the final journey, the one who could be trusted to take your grandmother's hand and lead her past Cerberus. So, was Hermes the first gig worker? He was the prototype. He's a mythic interface for our modern lives, a reminder that survival and success often depend on a range of skills, relentless adaptability, and a healthy dose of charm. Every time someone describes their career as, "I do a little bit of everything," they're channeling Hermes. He represents a unique kind of power. Not the static authority of a king, but the fluid, networked power of the messenger, the merchant, and the guide. He is the god of the connection, the hyperlink, the space between. He understands the universe runs not on grand pronouncements, but on quick messages, clever workarounds, and reliable deliveries that happen in the background. In a world that often overlooks them, he finds profound meaning in the quiet, essential jobs that keep everything moving, even when no one else is watching. Just maybe, keep in mind, if he ever happens to visit you, well, after he leaves, make sure to count your cattle.